Hey guys, welcome to another developer interview here at Without Parole Games. With me this week is Dan Dunham and Matey from Electric Hat Games, developers of To the Top. How you doing, gentlemen?
Good.
Doing good.
Fantastic. There's so much to talk about. I love the fact that I've been able to play your game extensively. We've talked about your game extensively. There's been, it's very, very frequently when I'm talking to a developer, I just have to take their word on things. But you guys, you're not gonna get anything past me, because I've played your game already.
That's good.
Like once or twice, maybe.
Once or twice, quite a few times. Des is a little jealous that he couldn't be here to do this interview himself.
Oh.
Well, tell him hi for us, because we really appreciate his praise and checking in the game out, so it's awesome to hear.
Well, before we even really start this interview, I have to say something to you guys. And that's, in the future, cities are not protected by superheroes. Instead, superheroes are built.
That's right.
Superbots are human-piloted robots engineered with superpowers to protect and serve the people. This is the description off the PlayStation Store of your game. Who wrote that?
Richard wrote that.
That was me. Me. So yeah, really, we are a gameplay-first kind of developer. So for the most part, we're all about the mechanics and like nothing gets in the way of like the core gameplay. So that kind of the story stuff went to the wayside, but in my head, there's definitely some other stuff we could take it and other areas we can go with it. So really, all that stuff is allusions to where we want to go, than per se what you get in the game. Because obviously what you get in the game is pure gameplay and little hints of what we might do in the future. But that's kind of why that little flavor text is in there, and then kind of give hints of what we want to do in the future.
So I guess my question that this leads into is you guys designed the game and then kind of tacked the story on. Is that what happened?
Pretty much, yeah.
And as far as the gameplay is concerned, the only time I ever hear people complaining about anything, really, the only time anyone has any complaints about To the Top is when, and I don't want to judge these people too quickly, but is when maybe they haven't given it enough time and that they maybe haven't mastered the control scheme. They're expecting another sprint vector. Is this something you hear a lot of?
Actually, yeah. At the beginning, like when we were very first testing out the game with various people in various venues, like getting the control scheme across to people did prove to be a hurdle for sure, because it's different than other video games. Like, you've had a gamepad now for so long, right? You just hand somebody a gamepad, and they pretty much know what to do with it at this point. But for To the Top, we weren't really asking you to use a gamepad in that way, But at the same time, we're not doing direct interaction like a lot. There's a lot of other VR games out there where everything's very straightforward and direct. Like if I reach out and I pull the trigger, I'm going to grab that thing, and then it's very intuitive. And so we do still have some abstractions there with the leaping, right? And so sort of teaching people how to leap and how to control that was a bit tricky. I think we've got it pretty good now. Like if they go through the tutorial at the very beginning of the game, which I think you're forced to go through now. Like when you very first start up the game, you have no other options than to go into the tutorial. But if you go through that, you should be good to go. When you hit that first level at this point. But yeah, that was definitely a friction point for the game.
I mean, I think one of you guys even dropped into my very first impression stream, and it was like, oh no, like you got to build up momentum, and there's definitely some nuances about it that take some time to learn. I think a lot of that, even with the tutorial there, just comes from time and experience. What I found is that I personally think it's like a very elegant solution to something, whereas something like Sprint Vector, there's no casual way to play that. You are gonna sweat. But I think To the Top, it's more like it's yoga instead of a sprint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the other thing that we were going for, though, or what we were trying to achieve, was accuracy. So one of the things that we've noticed with other games that use climbing mechanics is that the jump is not accurate, right? And so when you're making a platformer, the jump has to be really pure, right? Like that has to be the same for everybody that uses it. And the way that we did our jumping mechanic into the top is always the same for everybody that uses it, no matter how they do it. And that was kind of that's what we were really trying to go for. Like that's the key part, we think, to making a platformer, especially something where you can have lots of dynamic obstacles and things like that going on, is making sure that when no matter who's doing it, how they're doing it, they're getting the same result at the end.
There's obviously two very, very different ways to play this game that are both built into the game very well, and that's we have time goals, and then there's the rewards for exploration when you find the hidden geomes. Were both of those in from the start, or were you like, oh, we're gonna do an obstacle course thing, and then later you figured out that, hey, this is kind of fun to just explore, or were both of those in there from the get-go?
We actually experimented with that. So from the get-go, we knew we wanted time trials, because that's obviously the way you can go through it once and kind of get a feel for it, and then figure out what's the optimal path or what the way you want to tackle it is. So that was the first one, and then for the most part, we were kind of looking at Trials, the motorcycle game, at looking like, okay, they're very much, it's a very different game in many ways, but their goals and how their mechanics work are kind of similar. So they do time trials, and then they also throw in like different challenges per level. So some of it's like, oh, find a thing, or ride it backwards, or do a wheelie through the whole thing. And that is one of the things that we were thinking about, like, oh, every level we could think of a new alternative way to like run about the course and come up with these different side challenges. But we never found that was really that interesting, or it definitely didn't pan out the way we wanted to do it. So the geomes were the kind of the second thing that was incorporated, because obviously we want to like enhance the game and show like, hey, you can explore around. It's not just one little path. There's little things off to the corners and things you can discover. And then the hidden medal was the last objective that we wanted to put, and that was actually just adding these alternative paths and challenges.
That's like hard mode.
Yeah, that's like the more challenging focus of it. And we found those were like the really nice balance of what people can get out of the game and play the way they want to play it. So, if you wanted to skip the geomes or the hidden medal, you can go about that. Or if you wanted to do that and just run the course at your own speed, you could do that as well. So,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that Des and I have said countless times that this is at $20 to the top is one of the best deals on the PlayStation Store, hands down, just from the amount of game time you're going to get out of this thing. Because every single level, I'm not a speedrunner, so the fact that I really wanted to hit that that first place time, and then the fact that even once I'd spent an hour with this course, like mastering those times, I wanted to go back and find all those geomes and then by the time you're done each level, you're like, I know this thing inside out, and you go back to it and you're just a pro. It feels great. I love what you guys did in that regard.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
So like I said, Des isn't here, so we have to ask Des questions. And no one I know gets sick from playing this game, which is ridiculous, because it's one of those games like Windlands or Sprint Vector again, that you're jumping, you're leaping, you're grabbing onto walls, you're turning your head and going into a different direction, and it's kind of non-stop action as you build that momentum. What's the magic? Why doesn't Des get sick? Why doesn't anyone get sick when they play this game?
I don't think it's not really magic. It's just trying to reduce the things that cause the most sickness with movement. I mean, anytime you have movement in the game, somebody somewhere is going to probably get motion sickness from it, right?
Sure.
And in our game, there was no way we could completely get rid of at least the linear movements, but I try to keep all the movements as linear as possible. And also, I try not to accelerate or decelerate the player, really. So whenever you're moving, you don't accelerate to the next velocity, you just jump to the next velocity. So you go from your climbing velocity straight into your leaping velocity, right? The only time that there's any acceleration is if you're falling. And a couple of things that I tried to do there, one of the complaints that we got is if you fall and then you land on the ground, the sudden stop was actually causing a problem for some people. And so what I did was I added a particle system that goes the opposite direction when you stop and like slowly fades away. And that seems to help, because then you have something that your eyes are tracking still in that same direction, but it sort of slows down, then fades away, and then you can see through the sort of dust cloud or whatever. And that did seem to help. But I think that the thing that really helps is actually the comfort grid, the sort of vignette. So a lot of games, when they do a vignette, they do just a black, you just have a solid black outline.
Yeah.
What I have is there's actually a rendered cage inside of that blackness inside of that void. So if you turn it on and like make it as small as you can look around inside and you'll see you're actually inside of a box that's like made of a grid. And that offers like a kind of a cockpit kind of effect where you have a fixed frame of reference in the side of your vision instead of just a void out there. So your eyes have something to track onto, if that's an issue for you. That actually helped my girlfriend play the game because she gets motion sick very easily. So
yeah, it's also paying attention to other things that the player gets out of it. So like we don't get a lot of complaints about motion sickness, but like heights is another thing. So that some people get really afraid of being up so high and falling and stuff like that. So it kind of is not only just game mechanics but also the art. So the art, we actually did like a game jam 3 years ago, I guess now.
Yeah. Where
we made it a realistic like Everest type of mountain, and like you look around and it kind of looks photorealistic, and that really scared the shit out of people. So it was like, okay, learning from that, I want to definitely, it's more like a roller coaster, right? I want to thrill the person but not make them feel terrified. So that's kind of why we went with the more simplified graphics and things like that, which help a lot with just rendering it in general, because we have these huge environments, and running in VR is tough. But we found that actually helped with comfort as well. It's just the style and recognizing like, hey, heights is a thing, falling is a thing. And then kind of mitigating that as much as we can, but also keep it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you succeeded. I'm pretty scared of heights, and I'm definitely up there on top of that crane. And I look down and go, oh man, how did I get so high? Because you're just climbing, looking up, and then next thing you know, you're really high up, and you didn't even notice. And even with the more simplified graphics, I was like, it did the trick for me. I was like, look down, I was like, nope, just keep going forward. So you did mention that the simplified graphics helps with in VR. There was a solid year between when this came out on PC VR and then when you guys brought it to PlayStation VR.
Right.
How long did development take before you got it to PC VR?
Actually, it wasn't too bad. So production was about 5 months from January till May, I think.
Are you talking about if we got the first release? Is that the production?
Yeah, the PC VR release, right?
Right. How long? What was basically the development time for the PC version?
I'd say it's about 1.5 years.
Well, no, I mean like solid. Like we were solid in production from January till May. Before that, it was just kind of, sort of playing with it, iterating on it, but not full time. So it's hard to judge, but I think less than a year for production. But you could tack on an extra, because it took me 3 more months to do the multiplayer stuff. Because we launched on PC in May, just the single player, and we had an empty coming soon button for the multiplayer until July or June or July. Yeah, is when we launched multiplayer for PC. Yeah.
Okay. And listed in the on the Electric Hat website, Dan, you're listed as the programmer and designer, and in Matey, you're listed as the director, designer, and artist. How many others were on the team?
So we had, I think there were 6 other people.
There's 5 other people.
There was five other people that we contracted, and had some folks helping us out with various things. Like we had one person that was helping us do some additional levels and environment art. We had another artist who was doing the customizable bodies and hands. And then we had 2 folks that were working on audio with us, and then we had one of my friends was helping with some UI programming and stuff like that. So yeah.
And then another person helping with the cover art and stuff like that.
And the cover art, that's right. Yeah, that's the art that you see back there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got my very own right here.
Nice.
Yep.
Got my limited run copy.
Glad to see it.
Nice. I still haven't gotten mine yet.
Damn those limited run guys. Man, I've got stuff ordered from them from 6 months ago that I haven't gotten yet. It's like, that's just, I can't wait when those packages show up in the mail.
It's coming though. It's coming. I know it's coming.
They're very much a mom and pop shop kind of thing, and it's really cool what they're doing. And
it's pretty awesome.
I mean, they're very it's very visible. Like they get those orders, they put it into production, like. It is limited run, so
yeah.
So you gotta have to be patient with that stuff. But it's awesome. The quality is great that we got out of it, so I'm really happy with it.
The quality is great, but this definitely leads me to a whole nother line of questioning, and that is, even for limited run, the To the Top run was only 1,800 copies. Who determined that number? That's like even low for them.
I think Limited Run determined that number. Yeah, they're the ones that they have this thing down to a science, basically, where they know exactly how many they can make and how many they can move, right? So they're the ones that figured that out. But most of that work was done between Panic Button and Limited Run, and not really. We didn't have that much to say with the that part of it.
Okay. Well, in speaking of Panic Button, I remember when Des and I were first doing some research before we did our To the Top episode. I started getting really confused because I was looking at Panic Button, I was looking at Electric Cat Games.
It's confusing.
Why the same names keep popping up? What is going on
What's
here?
happening here? So
what's happening? And you guys can definitely tell the story better than I can.
Yeah. So I worked at Panic Button as an engineer for 4 years. And I was working at Panic Button when we were working on, the first versions of To the Top and whatnot. And I was actually still an employee at Panic Button when we were doing the porting over to PlayStation. So that's kind of how that happened. And during the whole time I was working on To the Top, I was keeping everybody at Panic Button abreast on what was going on with the game, what I was building and stuff like that. And then after we launched on PC, then we started talking about whether or not we wanted to do a PSVR launch, and if Panic Button could help, and what that sort of could look like. It was a very kind of, I think, different way of publishing a game. I don't think there's a lot of employees at game companies that publish their own games through the company that they work for. Right. So yeah, it was unique, but I think it's worked out pretty well. I wish I had Adam here so that he could talk about his perspective on that as well. He's the director of development over there at Panic Button. Super amazing dude. But yeah, it's been really, really interesting and very fortuitous for us, I think. Yeah.
And for the most part, Panic Button is a port house, correct?
Yeah, for the most part, I guess you could say they're a port house. I think it's, working on some of the stuff that I got to work on there. It does feel a little bit more than porting though, because there are porthouses, right? Like Aspire, who that's what they did, was porting games and stuff. And our goal at Panic Button was always to add something to the game for the platform that we're bringing it to, right? So we tried to do something special for each game for each platform that we're bringing it to.
So having worked on other people's games and then suddenly working on your own game, bringing it from PC to PlayStation VR, did that feel different to you?
Not really, no.
Just got to get the job done.
It was a lot of mostly just get the job done, because I had set up the framework as far as the engineering side of the architecture, knowing that how you would bring a game to other platforms. And so when it came time to do the port, it was just click, 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 and just get through it and get it done. I mean, there's a few hiccups. There's always going to be a few things here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty smooth going. I was the only engineer working on it for that whole thing. So, I mean, we had other people helping us there at Panic Button with various other things like production and QA, but I was the solo engineer for that, yeah.
Were any of those hiccups worth mentioning? Anything that made it difficult to bring a game from PC to PlayStation?
I think that the thing that always seems to get caught on for any game is anytime you're doing multiplayer. Part of it is technical, and just getting multiplayer working properly through the systems that they have for whatever platform you're going to, and part of it's also procedural, where they have various requirements that you have to meet depending on the platform.
So where did this this is the strangest multiplayer I've ever played in any game ever. It's kind of co-op, it's kind of competitive. Who had the idea for this?
I think that was a combination of both of us, just because it started off, we were experimenting with multiplayer. Actually, our very first experiment with multiplayer was the shooting thing, wasn't it? Was that our very first experiment? Yeah, so we had an experiment that we did where you could climb, push a button, and your hands would turn into guns, right? And so you could climb and then jump, turn your hands into guns, and they're pow, 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 and then you're flying sideways and shooting at each other. And that was the very first time we got multiplayer working. After that, though, we decided that was really cool. But that's not what we wanted to do for multiplayer. We wanted to do something that was a little bit less prone to badness, I guess. Like people get angry with each other and stuff like that. And so the design for this multiplayer started off as a race, and it was just like, let's just do racing. And then after a while, we started toying with the ideas. Well, what if we could put things into the game to like screw up the other player? Like that was the original thing. But then it turned into, what if you could put things into the game that just breaks the game? And that's where it wound up going. Like the things that are in there now that you can place in, the placeables, they essentially break the map. But Richard went through and tuned all the times and everything for like the co-op goals to like some of the goals you'll see, like it's a 2 minute and 30-second map, but then the co-op goal says like 17 seconds, and you're like, what? That doesn't. So you got to figure out how to break the map to get that 17 seconds, So, and that turned out to be a lot of fun. Also, it made it work really well for the architecture that we had for multiplayer, because we don't have dedicated servers or anything like that. And so being able to do this where you could just connect to somebody and play really quickly without having to like matchmake or anything like that was another key component to what we were trying to do.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was looking at it as like, this is a clean slate. This is new kind of beginning for like different multiplayer games. Everyone has a headset, everyone has a microphone, and all that other good stuff. And my core philosophy was that the game dictates how you treat other people. It's just that simple. I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, we need more moderation with League of Legends and Call of Duty and yada, yada, yada. I don't think that effort's actually useful, because that game's engineered for you to get, have frustration with the enemy, with your players and stuff like that. And that's kind of a hook to the game as well. So it's kind of just thinking of like, how do we create this positive environment to have people chit-chat, go back and forth, have a fun time, and not be a-holes against each other. Because, when I play Call of Duty, I get, very angry and into it and frustrated and having fun, but obviously, we don't have moderators or like systems to be like, okay, I gotta check if someone's saying this or if they're doing this kind of gesture. So my main thing was just thinking about how do we have this kind of friendly kind of competition between these players and have these like more creative ways to interact, and then trying to find other hooks to get people playing longer. So for the most part, I think we're very successful with finding people to have good conversations with, have friendly banter with. Like I do To the Top Tuesday every Tuesday at 9:30 CST, and there's a good group of people that jump on, and we have a lot of fun and chit chat and go back and forth. And it kind of reminds me of like those beginning days of early Counter-Strike or early Halo 2, when you wanted to talk to people and get to know them and actually build these little relationships with folks and stuff like that. So I think we were very successful with that. As far as a game with a huge hook that gets people playing for hundreds of hours, it's not that game, but I think there's obvious ways that you could use those other frameworks and mechanics to bring that into that game, even if it brings a little riffraff, and that's just the nature of things. So
I'm pretty sure that everybody who's watching, all their jaws dropped collectively when you said that there were guns in this game at one point when you were experimenting, and I would love to see what that looks like. And I think the reason that I am so curious about what that looks like is because of like later in the game you end up getting these like Iron Man inspired seemingly kind of jetpacks, right?
So that was me. So I used to be a helicopter pilot. I flew for 10 years in the Army as a scout helicopter pilot. And so there's something, to me, magical about being able to hover. And so I wanted to try the Iron Man hover. Like, I wanted to see if I could make that work. And it worked pretty good. So Richard went on ahead and made a level designed around being able to use the Iron Man hands, or the jet hands. And I think there's one other level in there that has a little bit, at like the very end of the level, you have a little thing that you kind of fly through with the jet hands. It actually worked out pretty good.
It seems like you were tinkering with a lot of different ideas.
Yeah.
You had guns for a second to try things out. You got these Iron Man hands. So, I mean, I'd love to know what else was happening behind the scenes, or if you guys maybe have some, you took some of these ideas and are putting them into a sequel or another game. I'm more curious to know what's happening over there at Electric Cat.
We're definitely like knocking around some ideas and prototyping a few things with various other mechanics. The goal for the next game is definitely to be bigger, right? Like build on the core that we have now, and then make it more like what you would expect out of a bigger game. Of course, Electric Cat's still tiny, right? It's just basically me and Richard and whatever support we can get. But yeah, that's so yeah. We're knocking around some more of those ideas and thinking about other more familiar mechanics that you may have seen in other games and things like that too. So
yeah, I think for us, every level we kind of pushed ourselves to like come up with something new and fun with the formula, and I think we pretty much everything that we tried was successful for the most part. There's very few things that hit the cutting room floor per se of levels. Like there's like a roller coaster mechanic that I was messing around with that actually had like momentum, and you could hold on to it and jump on the different carts and then jump off when you wanted to, and that was fun. But there's never really a big level that was involved with that. And there's just a lot of mechanics that we can kind of go back into and refine. Like the giant robot's cool, but there's still there's some issues with it, and other cooler ways to interact with them, obviously, that we could do down the line. So for me, I really look at the formula that we created, and then kind of look at kind of platformers that obviously inspire us, and kind of want to get more of those robust features in. So you could even look at like the Astrobot and see like obviously they had way bigger budget than us, and we kind of so far we funded all our own project stuff. We had very, very little help besides Panic Button helping with the PSVR port to get this game out there, and we're very, very proud of it. But yeah, if we want to take it up a notch or try like a multiplayer shooter thing, that would just definitely be to the side, or something else that would require other ways to get that to market as well. So like outside funding or support behind it, like the guys at Firewall having support from Sony, and they just had a big booth at PAX South and stuff like that. You really need that to create like your multiplayer thing successfully and have that robust player base. So for us, we know it works. We know what we're good at. We want to like flesh it out and put more awesome stuff in it. And that's what we're up to. Just making fun gameplay and try to entertain you guys as best as possible.
Do you guys ever have time to play other PlayStation VR games?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
What have what's been occupying your time lately?
Actually, recently for me, it's been a lot of Beat Saber.
Nice.
Yeah. And then Borderlands. Like I played through Borderlands. I like Borderlands. That was fun. There was a few things in there that I think that they could have done polish wise to make it a little bit better. But it was a pretty good bring over from the original Borderlands to make it work in VR. Like I'd be curious to dig into those guys' stuff and see like what was the reasonings behind some of the decisions that they made and stuff like that. Yeah, that stuff always is curious to me.
Right. So Fast Travel Games, who I talked to last week, they recently divulged that 58% of their sales for Apex Construct came from the PlayStation VR sales. And the rest is split up between the PC VR headsets. Can you guys share any of that information with us about To The Top or sales figures at all?
So I can say that as of right now, the vast majority of our sales are on PC, and mostly Steam because we've been on Steam longer. We only got on Oculus at the end of December, or in the middle of December. Sorry, so it's very recent that we got on Oculus. But yeah, most of our sales were through Steam. But again, we're also like everything for us is grassroots, as far as marketing or anything like that. And so we didn't have any huge marketing campaigns and whatnot. Panic Button worked with Sony to do, some of the marketing on their side. But I can't really share numbers from Panic Button because it's Panic Button. That's Panic Button's data. So, but yeah, that's, we have like, on the PC side, we have, how many? Like 15,000 users, I think, right now?
No, we have like 33,000.
33,000. Sorry, 33,000 users.
Yeah, and then Apex I think is a different beast too because they did have a lot of Sony support. They hit PSVR first and stuff like that, so they've been they get that extra little marketing boost from that, and obviously they had a great deal going in to make that happen. But like us, we're grassroots. We want to just get it out there, get it to the players, and have them champion it more than anything else. We're not really we put our money where our mouth is, and then really we're talking to the players first. So that's kind of the kind of learning curve of our studio, I think, too, is that we're kind of just gung-ho on our own thing and focus on that and haven't done too many relationship stuff. But maybe that'll change in the future. But at the end of the day, we could put the games out. So I'm very, very happy with how independent we are.
So moving forward, do you think you'll still have this this year-long port time between your PC projects and the PlayStation VR, or do you think moving forward it's going to be something you'll be developing simultaneously for each platform?
That all depends on many factors. Being able to do multiple platforms at the same time in some ways has gotten easier recently, but it's still a lot of work, and you still need a lot of support to be able to do it. And so I think the key there, like if we if you had your druthers, right, you'd want to do it all at the same time. But then the key there is just building those relationships, getting everything lined up. And so when you hit that start line, you're like, okay, here we go, we're going. You can everything's lined up, and you can just go along the your production path. But I don't know. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to see how it goes over the next couple of months. I think we'll be putting those kinds of plans more into practice to see what we get. And
I think we're really proud for each version that we put out. Like we know it's good. We know it's customized for that particular setup. Yeah. I look at things like the Doom VFR on PSVR, and like, man, 2 of those 3 control schemes are bad. They're just not almost unplayable to me. But
wait. Which 2?
You got the DualShock, which is okay, but the move support in that game is the worst I think I've ever seen. And like it's this huge title. But I played it with the aim controller, had a ton of fun. It was like awesome. I was like, oh man, this is what I wanted out of this game. But yeah, I don't want to get into those mindsets of where you shotgun blast your game out, and like some of the support's okay, some of it's not there depending on the platform and stuff. So we kind of want to stand behind that and showcase make sure that each release is good, even if it takes a little bit of time to get to it.
Yeah. I know that Des and I are in the minority, but we're the 2 people on the face of the planet championing the move support in Doom VFR.
Maybe maybe you know something that I don't know. So
for me, the move support is fine. It's just the only problem that I have with the move support in that game is the 180-degree turning. Like I can't. Yep. That's the only problem, and there's ways to fix it. But it's one of those things, and for them to decide whether or not they should spend the time to fix it, whether or not it's worth it to them, and stuff like that. But yeah, I really like playing that game on PC VR. It's fantastic on PC VR. It's a lot of fun. They've definitely managed to capture the feel of Doom, to me, at least on that game. Like being able to, even with the dash movement system that they have, I could still like strafe turn around enemies and stuff, and I'm like, this is what you should be able to do in a Doom game. So yeah.
Nice. Well, so just getting back to the top for a minute, I need some advice. Later in the game, you get to some green surfaces rather than those, the blue surfaces you're used to.
Yeah, this is the black sheep of the game.
So I'm not alone.
No, yeah. So I created, I was working on the skate surfaces. They're skate surfaces, right? Like these slidey surfaces, and trying to get the physics right on that is very painful. It didn't do quite what I wanted it to do, but I also didn't have time to like really dig in and figure out what was wrong and like fix everything in it, right? But basically what you want to do with the green surfaces is you want to leap onto it, grab the surface, and then aim the controller in the direction you want to go, right? So if you're going, let's say you're on those the skate half pipes, right? So if you like follow the controller with the curve of the surface as you go, you'll actually speed up and be able to jump like higher up off. So those half pipes were kind of the inspiration for that. Because if you spend some time in the half pipes, I forget which level it is. I think it's skate.
I think it's
just called skate. And yeah, if you spend some time in the half pipes in there, like it feels pretty cool. It feels a little bit like a skate game.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, oh man, I wish I could do like, a flip trick or something right now because this feels badass. And so that's where it came from. And then we started like putting it into some of the later levels or whatever. But there was a few spots where it's like, yeah, it's a little sticky. It's a little more sticky than I wanted it to be.
The learning curve is pretty.
The learning curve is very steep. Yeah, it's pretty steep on that. But basically, the idea is grab the surface, aim. You're kind of aim. It's like you're aiming your hands to in line with the curvature of the surface that you're on, and it should like get you going that way. I know there's one level in particular where you have to kind of slalom around some objects, and you can really test it there because if you turn it, you turn your controller in the direction you want to go, you'll like kind of snowboard carve around the surfaces or whatever. But yeah, it's not as good as I wanted.
I promise.
Yeah.
I will go back to it. I promise. It was one of those things where I was constantly losing momentum, and it sounds like you've definitely steered me in the right direction here. And so, actually, since we're talking about skate games, the soundtrack in To the Top, it actually reminds me, and not from the genre, but it reminds me of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the original one, back on PS1, because it just fits the game so perfectly. Tony Hawk was like, it had all this punk music going on, you're skateboarding around, and it worked. It just gelled really well.
I think Tony Hawk might be Matey's favorite game ever.
Well, it was at one point. Definitely when it came out, like, yeah, that demo for Tony Hawk 1, I played for hundreds of hours, and then 2 I loved a lot, and I love the Skate series. That's probably the series I put the most time into. But yeah, definitely like what you're saying is that was definitely the inspiration for the game, was to bring in those heavy soundtracked games like Tony Hawk and a lot of stuff from the PS1 genre, where it's like, oh shit, we could actually put CD music on this, or like really good music on this. Let's go for it. And I really love that stuff. Yeah, like you said, it syncs up with. For me, it was also like this motivational factor of like, I want people to get into a rhythm that isn't like, hardcore metal, like da 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 da.
Something
that
helps this like
smooth groove dance kind of thing that that I was like really into, and like really helping to motivate the player. And then obviously when we put someone in the headset, like this is 100% of the person's attention, right? This is something that you don't really get anymore with any other media. Because if you're watching TV, you got your phone. Even if you're in some loading screens during a non-VR game, you're checking Twitter, whatever. So I was very self-conscious about like, okay, we have 100% of their attention. Let's definitely entertain them, and keep them into the game as much as possible. So that's kind of where it came from, with those inspirations from like the PS1 games, and then also thinking about like, okay, a person's in here. Let's make sure they're fun and entertained the whole time, because the worst thing for me is to be in a PSVR headset and have downtime of like waiting on the loading screen, or like waiting for a matchmaking thing. So that's where it came from. And then also talking with Cactus from Hotline Miami, I asked, because they had this huge soundtrack that people really loved. I loved it for sure. And he really just reached out to people on SoundCloud and got people involved with that way. And I looked in my local area at local bands and stuff like that, and seeing some amazing acts that I wanted to bring to more attention to people.
Awesome. It was a great selection of bands, a great selection of music. It's yep. Every time I drop in, I think, this works just as well as Tony Hawk did.
Thanks. That's great to hear. Yeah.
So when can we expect the next announcement from you guys? Whether it be, are we kind of done with To the Top? Are we patching any more? Are we bringing any updates to it, or is it all focus on the next project at this point?
I mean, there's a couple of the things on To the Top, but it's definitely slowing down as far as work on this version of the game, or this game. I don't really have anything to announce, but I don't know. Video game development is so different these days than it used to be, right? Like, especially for indie developers. A lot of indie developers, they stream their development and things like that. And so, I don't know. If we come up with something interesting, I'm sure we'll make a GIF or something like that. And you'll see it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we just released the Oculus version in November, end of November, I think.
No, it was actually the middle of December is when it went live on the store.
Yeah, so that was almost the conclusion of getting it onto all the major headsets and kind of something that might lead to something else. But yeah, for the most part, we're trying to wrap it up and get it on all the headsets. See where it lands with each of the different player bases. See where we're successful with it, and moving on to the next thing. So really, we're still in the idea phase for the most part for what we want to do next. But yeah, you could expect something really, really cool and awesome. And yeah, if you loved what we did already with To the Top, stay tuned, and I'm sure you'll get a huge
there will
kick
be
out of
more
the
of
next
that.
one.
More of that.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, spending some time with me, and giving us a little bit more insight, some behind the scenes looks at what happened during development. Yeah, I have to ask, where are you guys right now?
Austin.
I've been hearing stuff in the background the whole time.
We're at our office. This is my house.
We're actually moving into
we are moving into a bona fide office in next week. So yeah.
Cool. Well, congratulations on all your success, guys.
Thanks.
I again really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so that does it for another week of developer interviews. Obviously, we want to thank Matey and Dan over there at Electric Hat Games for their time. But also, I want to say that every week I ask developers questions that I think you want to hear the answers to. But what I'd like to do is start letting you know who I'm interviewing ahead of time, and that way we can incorporate some of your questions into the interview. So keep an eye on our community page, because that's probably the best place to stay updated. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I love you all.
Take care. See you to all the game cats out there.
Yeah, meow meow.